Welcome back. Well, if Sunday morning talk show hosts seem a little bleary-eyed this morning, it's because Saturday night was the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner. Now the parties start on Tuesday and last all week. Big names in the media business and corporate America compete for the biggest and best guest list and use the event for branding. How did a dinner of wonky White House reporters and policy geeks turn into big business in Washington? Well, join us to break down the bashes and why businesses think they matter. Pamela Sorensen, founder of the bi-coastal Pamela's Punch website, and Dylan Byers, media reporter at Politico. Pamela, you've been going to these parties for years. There are more parties than ever. What is going on in Washington?
Well, you know, New York has Fashion Week, Hollywood has the Oscars, Miami has Art Basel, and Washington, D.C. has Nerd Prom, also known as White House Correspondents' Dinner Week and Weekend. And what I think is really cool about it is that, yeah, it's all about the dinner, but it's really about the parties. It's really about bridging all of these different media folks and big companies, such as some of the parties that are going on this year, like Facebook and HBO and Google and Netflix and tons and tons of other
these tech startups. You can't really call Google a startup, but it has become interesting to see companies like Google that disdained Washington now using this week as an opportunity to say, hey, Yahoo, our party is bigger than your party, and compete like that. So, Dylan, you have written about the fact that now there's a lot of self-flagellation going on in Washington. Right. The New York Times is boycotting the dinner, even though one of the reporters is receiving an award, so he will be there. They say it's unseemly to be seen drinking and having merriment with the sources that you cover. And you said, you know what, don't take yourself quite so seriously.
Right, I mean, just, you know, all of these other parties that you mentioned, right? I mean, those industries can just enjoy themselves, right? And the reporters from those industries, from Wall Street, from Silicon Valley, certainly I'm sure from the art community down in Miami, they just go to a party and they enjoy themselves. Like, we feel the need to beat ourselves up. I mean, in the first place, we call it Nerd Prom. Like, we don't need to be so hard on ourselves. Like, we can just go and
What
have
would
a good
you call
time.
it? I mean, let's be honest. Vanity Fair. Vanity Fair is trying to prove that they're the cool kids on the block by hosting a private dinner for Michael Kinsley. I love Michael Kinsley, but he's the ultimate Washington geek. And somehow that impresses Hollywood. And somehow businesses think that it is important to brand and sponsor parties to be a part of all this. What do they get out of all of this?
Well, it's also important to remember that there's just so much, you know, money here in Washington, and there are obviously a lot of influential people here in Washington. And so if you're Google or you're Yahoo, you sort of want to like outdo the other company and sort of prove that you're really like the big player in that game. You know, buy some free drinks for a lot of lobbyists and journalists and see if you can get anything out of that. But it is amazing just how many parties there are now. It's
Pamela, Hollywood lost a little bit of interest during the Bush years. Attendance fell down a little from the left coast, but popped back up again for the Obama administration. We've seen the likes of George Clooney, Barbara Streisand, Steven Spielberg, big names attend these dinner. By the end of the Obama administration, it's falling down a little bit, but TV shows are using the dinner to brand. Yes. Name some of the big casts that are coming to try and promote their product.
Well, of course, Scandal. Scandal is a big, huge Washington love affair TV show. Everybody loves Tony Goldwyn, who plays Fitz, the president.
And it makes Washington seem more interesting than, let's face it, it truly is.
Yes, exactly.
I am hoping Scott Foley comes to the dinner shirtless, but I don't think that's good. I don't think we're quite there yet.
Hopefully not. Also, Orange is the New Black. Their cast is coming as well, and I believe House of Cards too. So
House of Cards cast not only coming, Dylan, but Kevin Spacey has become a policy wonk. He gets involved in some of these issues. It kind of sometimes is hard. The lines blur between, are you playing an actor who's playing a bad guy on Capitol Hill, or are you on Capitol Hill to lobby for issues? We've got the Creative Coalition that fights for funding in the arts and others. Is it getting too confusing to try and define, like, no, you're Hollywood and we're Washington?
I do think that there is a impulse among a lot of actors and Hollywood types, especially if they're playing the roles of these Washington-like figures, to sort of step in and actually do that in real life. What I find sort of interesting is how much the Washington crowd really wants to cultivate relationships with these people, like House of Cards, like Scandal, as opposed to maybe some bigger players that
well, but let's face it, you know what they say about Washington, it's Hollywood for ugly people. There's so many people in Washington who would love to be on the big screen, but at least will settle for the C-SPAN screen. But I also find it interesting that some of the Hollywood players, Pamela, truly do become very knowledgeable on the issues so that they can use their celebrity cachet for good. I point out the Creative Coalition. I have been impressed as a reporter to the extent in which they get very involved in the ins and outs of policy matters. They got involved in healthcare debate, which
and even with Rosario Dawson with Voto Latino, which does their event annually, she's doing. There's a lot of educational aspects to what can go on around these parties, different panels, different conferences, and I think they're using it in an intelligent manner.
So not quite the Academy Awards. You do have to attend a few panel discussions, but an interesting week to be sure. It is Friday. We have to admit today we'll be much more bleary-eyed in a couple of days. Thank you all so much for joining us on Washington Business Report. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more right after the break.